All right. Let's make sure we're live here. All right, there we are. Hey, everyone. Happy Sunday. Hope you're all well and safe and happy and healthy wherever you are. And welcome to our live Sacred Space session this Sunday here for the 45th live Sacred Space session. So I'll go ahead and get started, and I just want to start by saying welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me in this session, and that I'm honored to be here with you in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty, and I look forward to sharing time with you in our shared sacred space together today. So the things we'll do today in our shared sacred space is, number one, we'll go through the sort of, I guess you could call it, ritual of setting sacred space. Then once we're in sacred space, we'll talk about an overall topic for the week. And the topic this week will be the power of trusting your insight. The power of trusting your insight. Then we'll have an exercise, a suggested exercise, and then after that, we'll close sacred space. And so in opening sacred space, I'll start by saying, what we would like to do here is to create a space which is devoid of fear, threat, and control in order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, however we choose to define that. It could be intuition or downloads from the muse or just flashes of brilliance and insight that come to you that give you clarity of vision, clarity of purpose, enthusiasm, right, to move forward along your life path. So higher guidance from within our own selves, not from the outside, from within our own selves, however we choose to define that. And to do that, we want a safe sanctuary space for all of us to be able to relax and surrender with no fear of danger or threat, so that we can partake of the nourishment, the emotional nourishment and spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. And in opening sacred space today, I will propose that we all follow the principles, the 4 principles of Presidian sacred space. The first is confidentiality, standard Vegas rules. What happens in sacred space stays in sacred space. And that's basically the rule when we do these gatherings in person. But because we're online, the feed, the stream is public, the replay will be public. So the way we handle confidentiality online is via anonymization. And the way we do anonymization with the little setup that we have here is that if you would like to be anonymous, you don't have to be anonymous. But if you would like to be anonymous, you would come in to the Crowdcast stream. You'd register for free. It'll ask you for your email, and then you go into your edit profile feature, and then you change your username to Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, whatever it is you'd like. And then from there, you can proceed to participate, chat, ask questions anonymously. So that's number 1, confidentiality / anonymization. Number 2 is that in sacred space, we seek to observe this principle of no threat, no controlling, no fixing, not even tough love, right? So even if it's well-intentioned, tough love, you should do this, this will help you, we don't even do that. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but because that is of the provenance of control, right? Trying to control you, trying to intervene for your own good out of love. But because it is of the realm of control and even fear and threat, do what I tell you or else, right? This bad thing will happen to you, and I'm sacrificing to sort of save you from that. Because it's of the realm of fear, threat, and control, it is intrinsically profane. And that doesn't mean it's bad. What we always say is that profane isn't bad. Profane is just profane. It's just a difference. It's like salty and sweet. Salty and sweet, salty is not bad. It's just salty. And sometimes we want to focus on sweet. Sometimes we want to focus on bitter, sour, what have you. And so here, when we look to be in sacred space, that means there's no feeling of threat or controlling, even if it's well-intentioned. So we don't do that, so that we can enjoy the flavor of the pure sacred space, right? So here, we would ask everyone to hold space for each other. And what we do here is we hold space for each other to be however we actually are, to be afraid, to be anxious, to be happy and relaxed, to be however we are. And then however we react to however we are, right? Sort of, I'm anxious and I feel incompetent that I feel anxious. I'm happy and I feel guilty that I feel happy. I'm happy and I feel wonderful that I'm happy, or I feel anxious and I feel okay with being anxious, right? However we feel, and then however we feel about however we feel, we're just okay with that. We just leave you as is. We don't try to soothe you, hold you, recommend things for you, control you, because we're in sacred space. And there's a certain kind of nourishment that you can only get from being in sacred space, and so that's why we do it. The third principle is a corollary to the previous, which is no commerce. Right? So because we're in sacred space, we are in a realm devoid of fear, threat, and control. So nothing may be sold in sacred space. I can't sell you anything. Gary can't sell you anything. Please don't sell things to each other in the chat. Right? So nothing may be sold or recommended. So even if it's a recommendation, oh, that thing, my sister-in-law went through that thing you're going through, and she read this book, and she told me it was the bee's knees and it solved everything. So here's this book. So even however casual and well-intentioned that is, when I make a recommendation, there is a veiled threat there, right? That you feel, where it's like, gosh, if I don't take this fantastic recommendation, I may miss out. I may continue as a dunderhead in my pain. So we don't even make recommendations, right? We are here, in other words, for your energy, not for the things you bring, for what you are, not for what you do or provide, right? It's not about your value add here. It's about you, right? So there's no commerce. We're not sort of transacting. And then the fourth principle, which is also related, is that there's no expectation of participation, right? It's sacred space, no fear, threat, or control. So there's no pressure to do anything. You can chat. You don't have to chat. You can ask questions. You don't have to ask questions. You can invite your friends to come in. You don't have to tell them anything about what you're doing. You can show up for a little bit, leave. You can be listening to us and doing your laundry on your phone, sort of not even half paying attention. And whatever you want to do, that's totally okay. Because, again, the nourishment comes from the held space, right? And your presence, and all of our attention on this, not on each other per se, but on the space itself, that we then share the nourishment from as we like, without threat, because that's, not forcing you to eat more of this potluck that we're doing is part of the nourishment of the potluck, right? So all this is from what you are, not from what you do or provide. And all of us together, you can do this sacred space thing on your own, and there are many previous, in some of the previous sessions over the past, I guess, 10 or 11 months, we talk about those as well. But when you do sacred space in a group, all of us then together will tend to amplify that effect. So anyway, this is what I propose. And if you are okay with that, carry on, stick with us. We'll be there in a minute. But just a quick safety check. If you are not okay with that, that's totally okay. We will pause now for a moment to give you a chance to take a breath and make your selection, whether you would like to continue with us or not. And if not, that's totally okay. There's no fear, threat, or control to get you to stay in sacred space. Oh, this will be good for you. Won't it be great? Think of how good you'll feel at the end of it. You do whatever you want, right? And we'll still see you. We'll catch up with you later in profane space. I'll still be sending emails to you, and we'll still hang out, and no worries at all. So I'll give everyone a moment to make their selection as you feel best. Okay. All right. And so for the rest of us, we will now move forward together into our sacred space. And as we enter now across the threshold into our shared sacred space, I will just remind that in this space, we would ask you to observe the four principles of proceeding in sacred space: confidentiality / anonymization, no fear, threat, or control, no commerce, no recommendations, and no expectation of participation. All right, welcome to Sacred Space, everyone. One of the best parts of my week, and thank you for joining us. So what do we have for this week in terms of our conversation? So the topic for this week is, we've come up with the title, which is The Power of Trusting Your Insight, So in the session, the fairy tale that Gauri, my editor in Bangalore, kind of pulled and read for the both of us in our weekly brainstorm call, brought us to this reflection on, what is the nature of insight? How does it come to us? How does it guide us? And what are the pro tips that this story kind of reveals for us in terms of how to engage with insight, how to identify insight, and how to engage with it in good faith? And Gary selected a folk tale, a fairy tale from the Armenian tradition. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to invite Gary up on screen. Tell us about the story you've selected, and then maybe read it for us and we can kind of take it from there. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Artie. Hi,
hello,
everyone. Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right. So, you want to tell us about the story?
Yeah, it's a kind of magical fairy tale kind of story. So it's fun. It's a very feel-good story. I really enjoyed reading it and reading it out to you as well when we were discussing it. So yeah,
it's a surprisingly feel-good story. A little bit different from your normal.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to tell it, and we'll dive in?
Okay. So let's start off.
All right. Get off the screen here.
Right. So it's a story that that's picked from a collection originally collected by a historian called Frederick Mackler, and this was from. He's a historian who documented history of Armenia and also collected, legends and folk tales and stuff like that. So this one's from a collection. So it's definitely before the 17th century, and we don't know the origin, so that makes it exciting as usual. So the story is called The Golden-Headed Fish, right? And the way the story goes is the story at first begins in Egypt, where once upon a time there was a king who lost his sight from a bad illness, and he was unhappy, and he and his doctors tried many things, and months passed, and no one was able to cure him. And this king grew thin from misery, and everyone thought he was going to die. That's how unhappy he was. And the prince, his only son, also thought that, he was going to lose his father. So at this time, it so happened that a traveler arrived in a boat on the Nile. And when he questioned the people about why everyone looked so sad, he got to know what the situation was. And then he declared that he was court physician to the king of a faraway country. And he would like to examine the eyes of the blind king. And therefore, people, showed him the way. He was admitted to the royal presence. And then he did a study of the case. And he said, well, it's serious, but it's not entirely hopeless. So here's what we can do. Somewhere in the Great Sea, there is a golden-headed fish. And if you can manage to catch this creature and bring it to me, I know how to prepare an ointment from its blood that will restore the eyesight. And I'm here for 100 days. I will wait here. And if at the end of that time you still can't catch the fish, there's nothing much I can do. I will have to return to my own kingdom, to my king. So immediately the next morning, once they had heard this, the young prince took with him 100 men, and each of them carrying a net, and they set forth on a ship, on a fleet of boats. So, they decided that they will start the search at once. And for 3 months, they worked diligently from sunrise to sunset. And they caught a lot of fishes, but not one of them had a golden head. And on the very last night, the prince, almost gave up, but he thought, well, it's quite useless to do anything now. Even if we find it this evening, the 100 days will be over before we can, reach the capital, and the doctor will be on his way home. So there's nothing one can do. Still, I will go out again and I will cast the net one last time myself and see what happens. And when he did, at the moment the 100 days were up, he drew in the net and he saw the golden-headed fish entangled in the meshes. And, the prince looked at it and said, well, it's too late. But all the same, what I can do is I can put the fish in this vessel of water, take it back to show my father that at least I've done what I could. And he drew the fish close to him, and the fish looked up at him with such piteous eyes that, he couldn't bring himself to kill it. And he also thought, well, what's the point really? If I take it back, the doctors of my country who don't really know the secret of this ointment or the special remedy, they would still try to do everything in their power to extract something from this fish's blood. And, nothing will come out of it, and the fish would have died in vain. So he picked up this fish and threw it back into the sea and just started his journey back to the palace. And he reached the palace. He told the king what had happened. But the king was so disappointed that he refused to believe the story. He was angry with his son. He said, your head shall pay for it. And he told the courtiers to execute the prince. Now, of course, something like this is shocking to the entire court and everyone. So someone immediately informed the queen. And the queen arranged in such a way that the prince could escape at night. She put common clothes on him, filled his pockets with gold, and put him on a ship, which was sailing immediately for a distant island. And this is what she said to the son. She said, your father might repent someday, and he might be thankful to know that you're still alive. But I will just give you one bit of advice. That is, take no man into your service who wants to be paid every month. Now, the young prince was confused by this. He thought this was a rather odd advice. And how does it matter how the servant has to be paid? If it has to be paid, whether it's by the year or by the month, what does this even mean? But, he knew his mother was very wise, so he just decided to take that advice and promised her that he would follow it. And after, traveling for several weeks, he arrived at the island which his mother had indicated to him. It was a beautiful island full of hills and flowers and trees and beautiful white houses everywhere with gardens. And he thought, well, this is a really charming spot and I'd like to live here. And immediately he went to buy one of the houses. And then he started looking for servants, right, to work for him. And many, many servants came offering their services, and they were very, pleased to kind of join him for, his service. And they all said, this is how much we want to be paid at the end of every month. And this young man, he remembered his mother's words, and he refused all of them. And finally, one morning, an Arab appeared. And this Arab said that he would like to join his employment, and he begged that the prince would engage him. And when the prince asked, okay, what are your wages? And the Arab said, well, I don't want money. At the end of the year, you can see what my service is worth to you, and you can pay me in any way you like. And the young man was, of course, pleased to have finally found someone, agreeable to the kind of terms that he was looking for. So he took the Arab for his servant. Now, although the part of the island that the prince lived in was beautiful and charming, no one could have guessed that the other side of the island was a complete desert. And this was because of a horrible monster who came up from the sea every now and then and devoured all the corn and all the cattle and left the land completely bare. And the governor had sent bands and bands of soldiers to lie in wait for this creature when it comes out of the sea, to kill it or capture it. And funnily, no one had ever happened to be awake at the moment when the monster came out. And it was no point punishing the sleepy soldiers, because every single time when they sent a fresh batch of soldiers, the same thing happened again. And so finally, the governor announced a reward. Through the island, he said, a great reward will be given to the man who can slay the monster. And as soon as the Arab heard this news, he went straight to the governor's palace and he said, if my master can kill this monster, what reward can you give him? And the governor said, I can give him my daughter and anything else that he chooses. And the Arab said, well, you can keep your wealth. You may give him your daughter if you want, but from now on, please let her share in your gains, whatever they are. And the governor said, well, that's a reasonable request, but I would like to see this deed done. And they signed an agreement, sort of thing. And the Arab went down to the seashore that night. And before he set himself to watch, he rubbed himself with oil, some kind of oil, which made his skin hurt and burn so badly that there was just no chance of him going to sleep, right? And he sat waiting behind a large rock. And eventually the water seemed to kind of rise. And minutes later, there was this hideous monster that came out, part bird, part beast, and part serpent. And it stepped noiselessly onto the land. It walked stealthily, ate away all the corn, but the Arab was ready for it, and he plunged his dagger into the soft part behind the ear so that the monster gave a loud cry and just rolled over dead right away. And the Arab watched for this, and he cut off the ears of this monster and he carried them to his own master. And he told him that he should show them to the governor and declare that he himself had killed it. And the prince objected, but it was you, it was not me. How could I take credit for something that I haven't done? And the Arab said, never mind, do just as I ask you to, and I have a reason for asking you this. So, the prince finally gave in, and he went to the governor, who was absolutely delighted, and he begged the prince to marry his daughter, and the prince refused. He said, all I need right now, all I desire is a ship which will carry me around to see the world. And if you can provide that, that's reward enough. And of course, the governor was happy to provide this. And so the prince and his faithful Arab got onto the vessel. And then they realized that the governor had generously hidden stores of diamonds and precious stones, secretly in that vessel as a token of his gratitude. So they sailed and sailed, and finally they reached the shores of another great kingdom. And leaving the prince on board, the Arab went into the town. He wanted to know what kind of place it was. He came back after a few hours. He said that he had heard that the king's daughter was the most beautiful princess in the world, and therefore the prince should ask for her hand. And the prince listened to this advice. So he took some of the finest necklaces he had. He mounted on a beautiful horse that the Arab had bought for him. He went up to the palace, and then he met with the king. Now, this king was really amused by this prince's offerings and also the offer to marry his daughter. And after he listened to him, he turned to him and said, "I will give you my daughter if that's what you want, but I must warn you that my daughter has already gone through the marriage ceremony with 190 young men. Not one of them has lived for 12 hours. So think of what you're signing up for when you still have time." And the prince thought about it. And then the Arab whispered in his ear and said, "Don't fear anything. Just take it, right? Take the princess and I will take care of the rest." And so the prince listened and he turned to the king and said, "Well, luck must change sometime. And who would not risk his head for the hand of such a beautiful princess? So I'm ready." So the king said, "Okay, so be it. I will give orders for the ceremony tonight, and we shall have you married." And so it was done. And after the ceremony, the bride and the bridegroom retired to their own apartments. And the moon was shining bright. The prince walked up to the window just to look out and look at the view outside. And suddenly he realized that, there was outside the window, there was a group of men digging just beneath the window. And this was a strange hour to be doing gardening work, but what were they digging a hole for? And he suddenly realized that they were digging his grave in anticipation of his death. And just the shock of this made him completely speechless. He just stood there watching, and he turned around to look at the princess. And just at this moment, there was a small black snake that darted out of the mouth of the princess. And it wriggled towards him, apparently to bite him. But the Arab was hiding, and he was watching for something of this kind to happen. He immediately seized the serpent with pincers, held it in one hand, cut off its head with his dagger. And so the next morning, the king could barely believe his eyes when he saw his son-in-law just walk in. And the prince said, "Well, why not? I told you the luck must change sometime." And it has. "But I just have to ask you something. Would you be so kind as to tell the gardeners to fill up this great hole right under my window? It's really spoiling my view." And the king had no answer to that. And he said, of course. And from then on, the prince and the princess were very happy together, because apparently the princess was under a kind of spell or a curse. And the moment that her snake's head was cut off, she was, back to her normal self, so she could really enjoy the everyday pleasures of her life with her husband. And she, they had a great time together. And one evening, while they were having a normal, pleasant life, a man came down to the country, a strange man, and he straight away asked to see the young prince. And he knelt down to him and told him that he was a messenger sent by the Queen of Egypt. And he announced that the old king was dead. And therefore, the queen begs that the young prince set out without delay, bring the bride with him as well, and succeed his father as king, because the affairs of the kingdom were completely in disorder. So the young man went to his father-in-law, was absolutely delighted that this young man wasn't just a kind of a governor of a province or something. He was actually the king of a great kingdom. And he sent off the young couple on a splendid ship. And the prince reached the kingdom. And he realized that people, the kingdom and everything had suffered quite a bit in his absence. And once he took over as king, immediately things started recovering and the kingdom revived. And so one day, the Arab came up to him and he said, "I need your permission to return to my own land." And the young man was completely dismayed. He said, do you really want to leave me? Why would you leave me? And the Arab bowed his head and he said, "I would never wish to leave you, but I've received a summons and I dare not disobey it, so I'll have to go." The king was shocked, and he was choking with grief at the thought of losing his faithful servant. And he said, "For everything that you've done for me, it would be a poor return if I tried to stop you for my own selfish reasons. So you may leave if you have to, but everything I have is yours. So I bid that you take whatever you want. Take anything you like, because without you, I should have long ago been dead." And at this time, the Arab answered, said, "No, my king, without you, I should long ago have been dead, because I am the golden-headed fish." So that's
That's beautiful. Thank you. I love that story even more the second time. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll start as I usually do, which is to ask you, where do you enter into that story?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that struck me about the story is that it has a very strong kind of resemblance to two of the classics that we keep going back to. And one is the Fisher King or the Grail King story, right? Where to go to the little bit of the story where the Fisher King Anfortas first gets injured because he eats a salmon that he just finds on his hunt, right? So there's that fish connection and
the unearned boon.
Yeah. So the unearned boon, and he gets injured because of eating that, because it's not earned, right? And he's called Fisher King again, all of that connotation about fishing and everything. So there is a certain element of that in the story, and at the same time, it also reminded me of the Odyssey, because of all the journeys of strange islands and strange countries, and fighting monsters and moving on to the next country. So the young prince, from the time he leaves home to the time he gets back to his kingdom, there is that long journey of adventures that he has to go through. So it's a kind of a mix of both these classics. So I was very intrigued by that. Yeah.
I love that so much. Thank you for that. Yeah, someone mentioned this was like a longer story, and it made me think about the idea of, what is the feeling of a longer story where, you're telling the story and we keep thinking, we like, in the modern world, we like tight stories where there's a beginning, middle, end. It's done. It's 26 minutes with 4 minutes for commercials, right? Everything's very packed and efficient. And I think for me, one of the things that I like about these longer stories, like Odyssey is an odyssey of a story where it's like he goes up, he goes down, he's up again, he's down again. It's a roller coaster. And there's a similar kind of circumambulatory feel to the story. And one of the things I like about a longer story is that when you tell a shorter story, we can tend to just kind of put a little label on it and say, well, this is the takeaway. And you feel like there's this little fruit that you've sucked all the juice out of, and you kind of leave it and you feel satisfied. Of course, in real life, after about 3 hours after live sacred space or anything like this, if you're like me, if you're like anyone, you forget yourself again. You're like back in the profane, you're like arguing with whoever, you're feeling resentful for no reason, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And what I like about the meandering sort of aspect of this is that, for me at least, you do one loop and I'm like, okay, haha, that's great. And then you do a second loop and I'm like, okay, so now he's on the island and he's sort of got the princess, but he refused the princess and he's going down for like another round in the tumbler spin cycle. And it's like, how many rounds are we going to go through?
Yeah.
And when I'm listening to these stories, I have the same reaction, right? It's not that you're not doing a good job or it's too long or whatever. It reminded me that the nature of the story itself is to put you not just at an intellectual level, but at a body level as well, back into the feeling of circumambulation. Yeah. Because, I'll just speak for myself. When I'm going through circumambulation in my life of like healing and bliss, I am absolutely like, really? Are we really doing this again? Like, what did I not get the last time that I'm being punished for this next round?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like anything where you're like, making a wooden cabinet and you're like, you're planing it and then you're sanding it and then you're priming it, right? And then you're like staining it and then you're painting it. And the wood could be forgiven for thinking like, really, why can't you just do everything in one shot? And the reason we can't is because after one process, it takes time to like just let it cure and sit before you're ready for the next round. Because the action of the circumambulation, the action of the story is not intellectual, it's in your body as well. And for me, it's like, maybe I'm putting too positive of a spin on it. I've been known to do that, right? But it's like this idea of like, even sitting through the discomfort of a meandering circumambulatory story where the bully in me is like, come on, let's get to the point. This is me, right? Brings me back into the feeling of circumambulation too. Right. So when I realized that, this is where the intellect and feeling kind of like work together. I have that oh so cute, intellectual realization. But then when I go out and I feel that feeling of like impatience, not in a story, but in my life, right? That intellectual label comes back in and says, okay, this isn't necessarily bad or failure, or if it is, it's like it's part of a larger circumambulation. My usual excuse is, well, it doesn't make me feel any better. It's still painful, right? But here it's like, and the pain and the discomfort is part of the fire of transformation, as we've all been, experiencing during this 11, 12-month sort of pandemic at this point. So I love that cue to really kind of put me down into that. Appreciate it.
We've never had time to do the entire Odyssey. So this is like a mini Odyssey that gives a feel of the same thing.
This is about the limit of how far I think we can go in one of these like hour or 2 hour sessions.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
So what I will do now is I will try to sort of bring this entire stewy sort of bubbling mess, right, of a curly-cued circumambulatory story, and I'll try to put a sort of overall arc on it. It is an exercise in the sort of mythopoetic intellect, but as you know, like I'm always skipping over things where it's like we can't go down this rabbit hole or that rabbit hole because it's, you know, we don't have enough time. But I'll try to do that. But even after I do that, you know, when you think back to the story, I think the first insight for me is to remember the feeling of like, whew, this is longer than I'm used to. And then that itself is part of like the symbol or the pattern, right? That we are exposed to and kind of absorb a little bit of that nourishment. You know, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not teaching you that this is how you should read. I'm reflecting that that's how I felt listening to the story. And so in reading the story, I'll just say, for those of you who may be new, the way we read stories, dreams, fairy tales, when we do our healing work here, is that the way you read one of these stories is that you regard every major actor in the story, an object. So the fish will count, I mean, a sword, a sort of vessel will count as a major actor. And ideally what you do is you look to regard each major actor as a symbol of a separate part of your own inner self. Okay. So here, the king is a part of you, a part of your inner masculine. The queen and the princess and the princesses are parts of your inner feminine. You know, the Arab is a part of you. You know, the sort of the Nets, the 100 Men is a part of you. And the idea here is that we take all of these figures, we hit the play button, we see how the action unfolds, who's doing what to whom, right? What is happening? Who wants what? It's like analyzing any kind of scene, right? Except you don't regard them as separate people. You regard them all as different parts of your own inner self. And to the point, one of the things we talk about all the time is that we each have a inner masculine and inner feminine within us, right? Regardless of our external gender. So you can call it yin and yang. You can call it light and dark, left and right, masculine and feminine. And I use all those terms interchangeably. The reason I tend to sort of reflexively regress to calling them masculine, feminine, again, it's not male, female, it's not gendered, it's masculine in terms of principle of, you know, the energy and feeling of it and function of it, and feminine within us. And the reason I regress to that is because when you read these stories, the inner feminine shows up as, you know, a cat or a lion or a snake or a princess. And the inner masculine tends to show up as a king or an Arab or a prince. So to sort of juice the sort of wisdom and insight from those sort of classic tales, I kind of just go with the flow and do our own little sort of transliteration as we read. Okay. And so when we do this, then let's dive in to the story. So right at the beginning of the story, the authority inner masculine, the king, has a loss of vision, right? The king literally loses his vision and his eyesight. In a sense, it's like losing sight of the inner feminine, because as we always say, the role of the inner masculine, right? The function within us, right? So as a man, I have an inner masculine, I have an inner feminine. If you're a woman, if you're non-binary, you have an inner masculine, inner feminine. You can call it yin yang, but you have these two seemingly opposite principles within you that each serve different functions. And then throughout the course of a life, throughout the course of a story, they long for a reunion and reconciliation within you. So typically, as we observe in dreams, as we observe in fairy tales, the role of the inner masculine is typically protection, boundary control, and manifestation. He's like the COO who goes out and gets things done. The role of the inner feminine is typically nurturing nourishment, which we know the patriarchy is like, yeah, that's what we want from the feminine, but also vision, right? The inner feminine is the seat of vision. The muses are feminine for a reason. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, is feminine for a reason. And so, the inner feminine is more of a CEO, kind of visionary CEO. The masculine is the COO, protector and implementer. They're equal. I mean, they are equal, but vision comes from the feminine, right? So when you need to figure out what you're supposed to be doing, you look to your inner feminine. And when you need to figure out, okay, now that I have the blueprint, how do I get this done? You look to the inner masculine. And ideally, they work in close harmony together. One is not pounding the bejesus out of the other. Because then, it's like two legs. You need both legs in tandem to walk forward. And so this king has lost his vision, right? And the question then is, how do you restore it? How do you restore the vision? So this is like the critical kind of thing. And there are some small details here also that tell you about, the nature of vision. So he loses vision. And one of the first things that happens to him is he gets thin. He gets thin, right? So when you lose vision, one of the things the story is hinting to us is that you lose nourishment. You lose emotional, spiritual nourishment when you lose vision. So it's like, that's kind of obvious, right? But it's nice that the story consistently puts all these little jewels and baubles of insight, even under the overall arc. It's obvious when you read that. Yeah, when I have no vision, I have no life purpose, then I feel bereft of emotional and spiritual nourishment. I have no purpose. I don't jump out of bed every day. I'm just going in, punching in, getting my paycheck, and wondering what it's all about, right? So, and then overall, in terms of the story, when you see the problem presented in the beginning, right? So the king has lost his vision. We always say, look at the starting condition and look at the ending condition. And if in the end the issue is resolved, then we're okay. Everything that happened in the middle was all right. That's one of the ways you can get from point A to point B. And here in this story, it is resolved in a way because the old king lacking in vision has died, transformed, and the prince, the sort of emerging inner masculine, has come with full vision, with insight, with the golden-headed fish in tow, having earned. It's not an unearned inheritance. He's earned through all of these sort of adventures. He's achieved union with his own inner feminine. So he comes back to take over the kingdom rightfully. And then the other hint is that, the feminine queen calls him back, right? Because it's time now. So she is sort of the master of ceremonies of everything in a way. And when he does this in accordance with the vision of the queen, the kingdom sort of kind of flourishes, right? So all in, we know then the story is like, okay, the question is, how do we get from point A to point B? From loss of vision back to the restoration of vision and the flowering of the entire queendom of you, right? So when prince and princess get together and marry in a fairy tale, and we say live happily ever after, go forth and be fruitful and multiply, we're not talking about biological children or real estate or property per se. Right? This is the inner feminine and inner masculine within you. And when they finally come together in healing and wholeness, right? You feel whole and you are procreative, you are productive, you follow your bliss. If you're an artist, you're like prolific, right? And you're happy with the work. It's that kind of feeling. So at the beginning of the story, this emerging masculine, the prince, is in no condition to take over the kingdom. It's the entire circumambulation of the story through multiple rounds that actually makes him ready, right? And so the first thing the prince does is he listens to the guidance of the doctor and goes out in good faith to capture this fish. Now, the fish, as Gary has mentioned, is a symbol of insight, right? Fish is a symbol of insight. The ocean in dreams is a symbol of the sort of the emotional depths of your own inner self, right? It's like kind of bottomless, it's endless, it's vast, it's larger than the conscious sort of land part of us. And things from time to time will come up from the depths, or we'll go fishing for them. And so fish, whales, dolphins are typically a symbol of insight that come up from deep within you, right? So Jonah the whale came up and snatched Jonah from the shore and brought him down. It wasn't like Jonah was swimming and he should have known better. He was running away and the fish came and took him, okay? In Christian Celtic kind of tradition, salmon, as Gary mentioned, is a symbol of wisdom. In the Catholic tradition, the Pope's kind of mitre, the hat with a little notch on the top, is shaped like that because it's supposed to be the shape of a salmon head. And so fish is a symbol of insight. Now, gold is also a symbol of insight. Right? Currency in a dream is ego power. Gold is insight. So a golden-headed fish is kind of a symbol of like the ultimate big boss of insight. And that's what you are questing for here. Okay. And the question is, how does he get this insight? And what does he do with it once he has it? Now, the first test here of the prince, and these are all the tests he goes through to be able to regain vision and, sort of revive the kingdom within you, is that even during the first 100 days, he's doing this, obviously. We have the 3 levels of will, need, want, and desire, which we talk about in previous sessions. He's doing this for need and want, right? For prestige and validation. He goes out, he is this kind of dutiful son, doing what his father tells him to do. And he tries to sort of make a go of it. He tries to sort of get the fish, not even for the insight. He's getting it because his dad told him, because the doctor told him. And he's just plugging along, right? So he's almost like this pack animal, not doing things because he desires it, but because of, prestige, desire for prestige and validation. And that's okay, right? There's an early phase in life for all of us where we are in that mode. But then we transition into the next mode. So here, the 100 days pass and he is not successful, right? So you could read into this. The way to get this ultimate insight is not through just prestige and validation, not just through need and want, but rather for desire as well. And on the eve of the 100th day, he's like, even if I catch the ultimate insight now, there's not enough logistical time to like get it back. So there's no reason. I mean, we're done, right? There's still 10 seconds on the shot clock, but we're basically done. Okay. And at that point, you shoot one more time anyway, and it goes in. Right? So he casts his net anyway, literally for no good reason. He casts it out of desire. Right? Because we've said before, desire is the thing you do for no good reason. Desire is the thing you like and you want for no good reason. It's not going to get you prestige. No one's going to clap and cheer for you. It's not going to make you any money. And yet, you know what? So sue me. I just like it. And do you allow yourself to do things for that level of no good reason? You don't have to, but these stories give us these patterns of like, it's not. It's not a disaster if you do follow that golden thread in your life every now and then. So he casts the net anyway. That's when he gets the ultimate insight, right? From this point of full surrender, right? Not from the point of utility, right? But from the point of doing it from no good reason, then that's when you get it, right? So when you're like pushing hard for something, you're trying to solve this problem, and you're finally like, oh, forget it. This isn't going to work at all. And then you look, but will it? Right? And then you try that a few times and it still doesn't work. And you're like, for real, screw this. I'm done. It's a failure. Just let it go. And often that's when it will hit. Now, even after catching the fish, he does still have this priority, right? This need and want don't go away. So he's like, okay, it's too late, but I could still take this fish as a consolation prize and still show it to my dad and still get some prestige and validation. And so this then is the second test. The second test is when he does bring in the fish, he has this insight under his control for now. And yet, he is moved by compassion, i.e., for no good reason, right? For no good, in the profane. In the sacred, it's the only reason, really. But in the profane, it seems like there's no good reason, right? Why do I have compassion for you? Right? What does compassion mean? It's compassion. It's like I suffer, passion is suffering. So I suffer with you. Your suffering becomes my suffering. I have no idea why, but that's why I feed you. That's why I take care of you, because there's something in you that when you suffer, I feel it myself, right? And as many people have said this, but as Schopenhauer would say, at that moment, right, the veil is partly pulled aside, and I see the reality that there is no difference between you and me, that I am you. Right? You read these newspaper reports of people who run into burning buildings and save, not even a baby, but just another guy, right? And sometimes in the post interview, they'll be like, no, I'm not a hero. It's like, I would have done it. And then when you scratch a little deeper, there are instances where people will be honest and they'll say, I just knew in that moment that if I didn't save this person's life, I just wouldn't be able to live another day. Not through guilt, but it's like when he dies, I die. It was just this inexplicable feeling. And that's when I ran in, because I'm dead anyway. I may as well try and go get him. And so that veil is partly in these extreme emotional situations, that veil is partly removed and there's this feeling of oneness. So anyway, he, for no good reason, lets the fish go. He sees this piteous look on the fish and he's like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to let you go. The fish doesn't even bargain with him. He just lets him go. This insight can bring him validation. But basically the message here is, if it can't bring me to full vision, because I'm missing the doctor piece now because he left. So I have this thing, and if it doesn't do what it was supposed to do, what it's meant to do, then I don't want it for any second freaking prize, right? It's like we go all the way or we don't go at all. That's the feeling there. And he passes the second test. We don't really realize he passes until the very end of the story. But it's like, in the pursuit of art, right? The example I often give is Picasso. So when he transitioned from his blue period to his Cubist period, everyone loved blues. They're paying all this huge money for blues. His dealer was happy. He was happy. He was making tons of money. And then he started painting The Women of Avignon was the first Cubist painting that he released. And he went in this really weird Cubist direction, and his revenue cratered. Nobody would buy anything. And he stopped painting blues. Right. And his dealer was like, okay, you can do whatever you want, but can you at least continue painting blues so we stay afloat and we can eat? Right. Just take a note paper, take the back of an envelope and just, give it a blue brushstroke and I will be able to sell it. But you need to keep doing this so we don't go out of business. And Picasso was like, I'm paraphrasing, but he was basically like, my friend, I love comfortable life as much as you do, but you're saying all this as if you think I have a choice, right? And I don't have a choice, right? In Picasso's view, the muse shifted and he had no choice because he follows the muse. That's how he does it, right? So when he paints, he doesn't paint to make money. He paints to paint. So he can only take the fish, the prince, to restore full vision. And if he's not going to get full vision from the fish, then he doesn't want it for anything else, right? So I guess the feeling of it is like, if you have this gift, this early unearned boon, as we have said in past sessions, right? The attitude here of the prince in passing the trial is to say, this gift, this insight, this superpower that I have is meant for this, right? That's why I'm here on the planet. I'm here basically only to do this, and that is what I will do. Right. And if you ask me to use my superpower to do other things, maybe you'll dupe me into doing them. Maybe it's some trial and error. I see if that's what I'm supposed to do. But the minute I realize that's not what I'm here to do, then I drop it. I don't do it because it's not what I'm here to do. And it reminded me of so in a past life when I was advising Silicon Valley startup CEOs, right? One of the key bits of advice I would always give is, as a new CEO, you've just raised some money and you've only got like 6 employees, right? Even in that situation, you need to ruthlessly sort of look to spending your time. And this is not just for this is anything. Spending your time doing only what the founder CEO can do. Right? When you realize there are certain things that only you can do, then you're the bottleneck. And everything else that does not need you to do, you need to job out and push out as much as possible. That's what funding is for, right? To basically clear the bottleneck of the visionary founder CEO so that as much of that juice can flow through her or him as possible, right? So that you get the maximum time to do what you alone are meant to do. And this kind of has that similar feeling. And this insight, this golden-headed fish, can be anything, right? If you're good at math, if you're good at music, it's because you have a special kind of insight. You have an ability to see in the math world, to see in the musical world, a way that in which other people are not able to see. It's this power of insight. For me, you know, I have this ability for, you know, speaking pretty words. I have ability for, you know, charming persuasion, the ability to create and spin vision for other people. And for a long time, I used that to raise money for my companies that I would get funding from and sort of go out and make a run for it in the market. But what I realized over time, that's not what that gift is for, right? This gift that I have, I'm not entirely sure what it's for, but after a while, I realized it's not for that, right? I would feel in my body it's not for that. I mean, I felt it from the beginning, but I ignored it for a long time. and so, you know, it's not for that, then I'm going to cast off and go off in a different direction and try to discover what it is for, right? And I still don't know exactly what these gifts of mine are for. I'm still discovering. I mean, it's something I think in the direction of healing and all the stuff that I do, but I still don't know for sure. I'm still discovering. I don't know. And the point is, I don't have to know, right? I'm going with feeling, and that's good enough for me. So another point here is to say that you could say the golden-headed fish is an early boon, not exactly unearned, right? He did earn it, but he's also not ready for it, or he doesn't know what to do with it, right? And we come back to this question of what do you do with an early boon? Like in that story from a couple months ago, the roses and nettles story, right? That daughter who was the rose's daughter immediately took the boon and tried to run off with the prince, right? So do you immediately run off like the daughter in Roses? And we know from that story that probably isn't the way to go. In other words, it's not allegorical like you shouldn't, but it's like you will, and it'll be a dead end. And that's okay. It's a valid circumambulation, but like many of us will just vote to try to run off early. And this prince, right, who has this powerful inner vision, says, no, if we're not going to do the right thing with it, we're not going to do anything with it, right? And you can almost say that it takes this emerging masculine prince 190 transformations being killed by the snake, or this prince, the 191st prince, truly gets the full insight and power of the magic, right? Because all of these are different parts of your own inner self. So the 190 princes that failed the test and got bitten by the snake and was transformed by the wisdom power of the inner feminine, which is what the snake is, those were all you. Those were 190 circumambulations where the prince in you went the other way and tried to fillet the fish and get blood and get a pat on the head from his dad, which meant that he never left, he never did all these things, he never got the correct princess. None of this ever happened, right? It's only the 191st where he was refined enough to actually push all the way through. So even your failures, right? Your failures to be like, oh, spiritual enough or sort of insightful enough are part of this cumulative circumambulation. So anyway, because he wouldn't extract blood from it, right? This fish is bound to come back to him, right? So for me, as I was reading the story, as Gary was reading to me the first time, you know, as soon as he let the fish go, I mean, this is just a standard, you know, it's I mean, cliche. It's not so much cliche as it is just a standard mechanism. as soon as you let this animal helper go, you know it's going to come back and help you later. Okay, that's how it works in fairy tales. I didn't quite get that he came back as the Arab, which is very interesting in hindsight. But I did know that he would come back, which is why I love this story. It's like it follows the sort of consistency, but in a very sort of insightful, interesting way. Now, this fish is a symbol of insight, but it's also an animal, right? So it is an embodied insight, right? So when you see an animal in a dream, it's a symbol of neck down, sort of not mind, but body, not intellect, but instinct, intuition, sensuality, sexuality, physicality. It's your body side of self. When you see a horse, when you see a wolf or a cat, it's a symbol of your body self. So this is a golden-headed insight embodied in you. It's in your body. You don't have to think about it, right? It's something you feel. In the same way that this prince felt the compassion for the fish and just reflexively let it go. And in fairy tales, the general rule here is that an animal that comes to you to help for no good reason, you can generally always trust that animal. I mean, this is across world traditions in Northern European Grimm brothers and Hindu tales, even North American sort of native tales. The helpful animal you can always trust, which said another way is the feelings from your body that are trying to help you. How do you know they're trying to help you? You get familiar with your body and you know, right? Part of the loss of wisdom in the modern world is the mechanization, intellectualization of everything. We're cut off from our bodies. We're just like, well, in theory, what does the data say? What does the theory say? And if I ask, well, how do you feel? You're like, well, that's irrelevant. Look at the data, because that's repeatable. Or my feeling is not repeatable. In other words, my feeling is not controllable, right? And just because it's not controllable, the intellect wants to dismiss it, because anything it can't control, it fears. But something you can't control isn't any less real, right? That's the irony of science, where it's something that is not controllable, you try to push out of the realm of science, which is fine, because if you can't control it, you can't science it. But the mistake we often make is that, well, if we can't science it, then it isn't real and it doesn't exist. And that is definitely not the truth, right? That's like the most unempirical stance you can actually make. And it leads into all kinds of other issues. So the animal that comes to help you for no good reason, you can trust it, reconcile with your body. And when you have this sort of congress with your body, this easy back and forth where you're not stuffing it down, it's not rebelling, it's giving you signals, and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, got it. You can trust those feelings that come with it. So he lets the fish go. He goes back to the father. Of course, the father yells at him, right? This is the inner masculine authority, patriarchal, literally with no vision, right? So the father does not see the larger pattern of his goodness, because he has no vision, right? That's the kind of person who says, well, this is all highfalutin and fancy, but I don't get it. I don't get why you read all these fairy tales. I just want 3 square meals and a quiet life. And why does everyone sort of bully me anyway? I don't get this, right? That's a person with no vision. And so the masculine with no vision, father, tries to kill the emerging masculine with vision, right? Why would you kill your son as the king if you already lack vision? Right? I mean, it's like, this is the son who has vision. If anything, you should retire early and let him take over. But of course, because you lack vision, you can't see the larger picture. But the inner feminine, of course, always the inner feminine, the queen, comes in and saves him, because she is the persistent holder of vision. And then she gives him advice. Don't take the services, basically, of the profane, right? If they want monthly play, they are ordinary. She has the vision to say, on the journey you are going on, you need something extraordinary. I take paying monthly as a symbol of the profane, because it is of the realm of fear, threat, and control. Because you pay me monthly. So any month you don't pay me, I don't work. fear, threat, and control. Which we're like, well, that just makes sense, doesn't it? It's like, yes, that makes sense. In the profane, there's nothing wrong with the profane, but she's specifically saying on this next part of the journey, you will need the powers of the sacred. And hold out until you find the powers of the sacred. Then this Arab, which is actually the fish in disguise, comes in and says, basically, I'm going to help you for no good reason. Right? So this is what we said in past sessions. The thing you take care of and nurture and help for no good reason then becomes a sacred thing through the action and power of your care. Okay? And then that sacred thing then eventually turns around and takes care of you. You help the fish inside for no good reason, and now it's coming in to help you for no good reason. You can pay nothing, there's no threat, there's no fear, there's no control. If at the end of a year you think my help wasn't worth anything, there's no need to pay. If at the end of the year you think my help was worth something and you don't want to pay, you still don't have to pay. Okay. And the prince now only knows to hold out for the Arab through the advice of the feminine. So this is the vision of the inner feminine guiding the inner masculine. Okay. Because he comes after 100 servants. So again, there's 100 past times where he didn't take the advice, right? Like mythopoetically speaking. And those are all the 100 past circumambulations. The 100 past, guys with the nets who like failed for 3 months for 100 days. And that's why the sort of snake woman is not just 100, but it's 190. You've gone through this even more than you thought you did. And now finally you're at this point of clarity of vision. And so, so basically, the inner feminine brings you to insight, and the smart one, ironically, will follow the inner feminine, blindly, right, in the story. These adventures, I won't go into all of them. There's tons of richness there, but they tend to follow a standard pattern. The fish is disguised as an Arab, which is this sort of hidden coded thing, because from the medieval Christian view, right, the symbol, and it's an Armenian story, so it's like right on the border of like, sort of East and West. So from the medieval Christian view, right, the symbol of an Arab, a pagan, right, was this coded symbol of the body, intuition, and instincts. Right, the Christian tradition was seen more as this intellectual, sort of blue and white are the colors, right? The voice and sort of the ultimate spiritual, abstract, intellectual, but then cut off from the body, right? The Virgin Mary is okay, fine. We'll like admit that she gives birth to the Christian Savior, but she didn't have sex, right? It's basically all cut off from the forces and powers of the body, which is physicality, vulnerability, desire, sexual, hunger, right? All these things are like attempted to be conquered by the intellectual, when in reality, you need both, right? You are both. And in the Fisher King and other sort of medieval stories, all throughout the Arthurian sort of tradition, whenever you encounter a pagan knight, you're encountering your own body self, right? Your own body self. At the end of the Parsifal story told by Wolfram von Eschenbach, right? The sort of high Middle Ages sort of German poet. At the end of the Parsifal story, Parsifal does battle, right, with this pagan Arab knight, whom he doesn't realize is his own half-brother, Feraphiz. And finally, they come to a draw. Parsifal's sword breaks, and Feraphiz is like, well, there's no honor in like the Arab, right? The pagan says, well, there's no honor in striking down an unarmed man. Why don't we go over to the glen and sit and have a drink together, right? Have some tea. And Parzival's like, well, all right, and he goes. And as they both take off their helmets, it's like it says in the text, it's like they're looking at each other, looking into a mirror of themselves, and they realize they're half brothers. And the point, of course, is that this Arab other is you, right? This Arab other is you. And these are the stories that kind of gave this undertone narrative to historical events like the Christian Crusades, right? What does it mean when you come out in full force, armor, armed to the teeth, to put down and conquer and suppress the Arab side of your own civilization, right? What does that mean in a Judeo-Christian sort of patriarchal system? You put down Arabs, you sort of exploit animals, and you put down the feminine in all of her forms. So when the Arab shows up in this story, it's this body intuitive side of yourself that helps you for no good reason, right? And if you are wise and you listen to it and you deal with it in good faith, and you don't try to suppress it, it not only will advise you, it will go out and do things for you, right? Because the prince didn't actually kill the big dragon, and the prince didn't like cut the sort of snake down. The Arab did that for him, right? So we see this classic pattern we see in a lot of fairy tales, where the helpful animal doesn't just advise you, it takes care of everything. It tells you where to go, it tells you what monster needs to be killed, and then kills the monster for you, kills the black snake, transforms the black snake for you. Now, you could say this demon monster, the snake, are different lost board members, because the snake is a part of you, and the monster is a part of you too. Everything is a part of your own inner world. So isn't killing them suppressing them? Well, killing them, when you see death in a dream, it's a symbol of transformation. Okay? And the point here is that the Arab part of you, right, this intuitive helper spirit within you, is the one that does the killing transformation, right? So it's sort of like, instead of me intellectually forcing my body to sort of heal this cancer condition or whatever, right? The body, after you've reconciled with it, just takes care of it itself, okay? Right? Because the fish and the Arab itself is also a lost board member. It's down there hanging out with the snake and with the monster. And when it does these transformations, right, the whole thing sort of moves forward. So the killing is, in fact, what like a Western doctor would call a spontaneous internal healing or transformation, right? It just happened on its own. We have no way to explain it. And it's basically like, well, you can explain it. It happened on its own. Or the Arab went and took care of it for you because, you have this deep connection with the Arab that you don't even realize. You don't realize it's the fish. You're not looking for like a transactional reciprocity here. And the only reason you're even trusting this Arab who's working for you for free, right? It's a little bit suspect, is because you have the vision where the queen is basically telling you, just shut up and do this. Just do this. And you trust her, right? You trust the vision of the inner feminine. So it happened on its own. It's not intellectually pushed down on yourself. It's like that classic story, the cobbler, the old cobbler is like making shoes with his wife, and he's like falling behind, but he was nice to the elves, like in the previous part of the story. And then the elves come, then magically appear at night when they're sleeping and take care of all the shoes for him. That old sort of fairy tale. When you come into reconciliation with your inner forces, right, the elves are a part of you, right? They do stuff for you. They get stuff done for you. The Arab, the golden fish, the elves, they have their own autonomy and they will take care of things, right? It's like, I got this job offer and I took it. I don't know if it was the right decision. I ended up hating the job and I quit, but on the job, I met someone I love. I met the love of my life. So I couldn't have predicted this. It just happened. It just happened. I don't know if everything just worked out. I can't really explain it. It feels like magic. But these are the inner forces that the key thing to do is to come into reconciliation with these forces and to listen to them. basically to make sure they have everything they need, and then they will go out and take care of everything. Okay, along the lines of your bliss and vision, right? So the fish, the Arab, isn't going to take care of things just to get you your sniveling validation and prestige from your sort of authoritative, visionless dad part of you, right? That's not the right way to use the fish. The right way to use the fish is to basically say, okay, well, I've come into contact, I have you under my control, and I explicitly give you back control. I surrender to you, I give you carte blanche, do whatever the hell you need to do. Comes back in as an Arab and takes care of everything. So the fish then is the thing that gets him through the trial. He has then the opportunity to reintegrate with this aspect of the inner feminine, the most beautiful. And again, this, when we say this princess is beautiful, we're not talking about the objectification of just physical beauty in the outer world. This is the most beautiful, right? Beauty is truth and truth is beauty. The most beautiful inner feminine power within you, regardless of your gender. So your highest, most truthful, visionary, and source of nourishment. Okay, and he gets to reintegrate with this aspect of the inner feminine, the daughter of the covenant, the daughter of the final sort of that trial, right? And so, and it's interesting, he does something again, just like the golden fish, where the first governor, where he kills the monster, he offers his daughter, which is not the ultimate, right? And we don't know that yet, but he says no. Right, so you can inherit the kingdom, you can marry my daughter, and he says no. He asks for a ship to sail the world, to see the world. So this is exactly the same action as the golden fish. It's not going to get you the full thing, but it's going to get you some interim, short-term benefits. And as he did with the golden fish, he said here, if I haven't fulfilled the satisfaction of my vision, I'm not going to sort of accept this version of it. I'm going to keep going. So what I want is not the inner feminine. I want a ship to go out and continue to satisfy my vision by seeing the world is kind of how I read that. And that is his priority. In the Grail King story, in the Parsifal story, Fisher King, Parsifal meets, has a first trial where he conquers this monster for this king. He offers him his daughter, and he even there you have the same motif as he says no. I don't want a kingdom that I inherit. I want a kingdom only that I earn. So this idea of saying no to additional unearned boons, and it's like I want to go all the way. I don't want the golden-headed fish for anything other than what the golden fish is actually meant for. And when we do bliss, we talk about following your inner flow of zhiran in Chinese. And this is exactly that same feeling. Okay. So now with this princess, the second princess, where, she's killed, the last 190 guys who have, tried to sort of have integration with her in marriage. The helpful animal, the sort of helpful, sort of intuitive sort of symbol, the golden fish / Arab, advises you to go in and do it anyway, right? And what does the prince say? The prince says, yes, yes, right? The sort of next king, the sort of father, right? Who's all about fear, threat, and control. He's like, I'm warning you, fear, threat, and control. She's already been married 190 times and they all didn't make it past the 12th hour. And anyone in their right mind will be, oh, that's okay, I'll take a pass, I'll continue on. Let's get on that ship and see more of the world. And your inner instinct, right, body side, helpful animal side, says, no, take the offer, do it. Right? And you're like, if I do this logically, intellectually, I will die. And he's like, do it anyway. And this is why this sort of knowing of the pattern across fairy tale is so important. When you get a signal from the helpful animal, just trust it. Right? When you get a signal from this inner instinct and body, just trust it. It may take you time and practice to work up that trust, but that's why you want to work up to that level of trust, so that when it tells you to do something that's very counterintuitive, you have the faith to do it. If you don't have the faith to do it, don't brute force. I wouldn't, just take a blind leap. You want to get to the point where you have this relationship of trust. Right? Even when I talk about the muse, I'm like, you can test her. You can have her tell you things that you'll do, and you literally keep a log and see what her batting average is. And if she tells you to do something that's way too scary, it's like, okay, I'm going to pass on that. Give me something, a little lower volume, and she'll give that to you, and you'll test her and see what her batting average is. And in the process, you'll get a feel for like recognizing that it is her when you hear her come to you, or the golden fish, or whatever it is, right? Here then, the thing that typically transformed the last 190 inner masculines was this black snake. So snake is a symbol of the divine inner feminine. As we read it, black is the color of wisdom. So it's this very powerful wisdom embodied, because snake is an animal, wisdom embodied inner feminine, body wisdom, intuitive wisdom, instinctive wisdom. And this is the wisdom that killed / transformed the last 190 rounds of circumambulation, where you came to exactly this point. And the only difference this time is not that the prince is any faster, because he's not. He's like looking up at the moon, which is a symbol of the feminine. So he's, again, looking to the vision of the moon, even in this crucible of test. Okay, the moon is what leads him to seeing the whole. So vision leads you down into the hole. And when he turns around, the snake is already on him, and it is the Arab, right, the counterpart of the black snake, that cuts the head off the snake, cuts the intellectual side off, even this, to get the full, pure, embodied wisdom. This is all symbolic. I mean, there is no real snake. There is no real princess. These are all avatar symbols of forces swirling around within you, placed in a story so you can see the action and understand, like, what parts you want to stay out of the way of to just let them flow. Okay. And so the difference here then is that he has the power of his insight, the golden-headed fish by his side. Right? In other words, it's like my intellect can only do so much. There's a point at which my intellect cannot do anymore, and I have to trust insight that just comes to me when I'm not looking and not even trying. Right? It's the 100th day I just throw the net out for no good reason, and this insight comes to me. And right, what do I do with this insight? I deal with it in good faith. I don't pimp and whore it out for anything less than what I feel is its ultimate sort of meaning and purpose in my life, right? Like, what is the point of Picasso's artistic sort of genius and vision, right? Is it so that he can make a lot of money and sort of have a nice house, or is it something higher and different from that? That's a very personal question for each person. I'm not saying like money is intrinsically like bad or not worthy, but each person, when they commune with the source of this insight, they get the download of what it's really there for. And it's up to each person to decide how they play that. Okay. And there is no right or wrong, right? I'm not saying you have to be like this visionary. You do what you need to do. But here there is this sense of like, you do it, and the snake will take you down, or the monster will take you down, and it'll be one of the 190 rounds you go through until you get to that round where you actually have done everything in this way. Not necessarily the right way, but in this way where you retain this power because you've dealt with it in good faith and you trust it. And because you trust it, because you trust putting your weight on that toehold, right, you're able to sort of reach to the next thing and complete the climb. Okay. So this inner feminine wisdom, right, through the power of voice mouth, the snake coming out from the mouth of the inner feminine, comes to transform him. And this time, it actually worked. The princess now, because you've passed this trial, the princess herself is restored to full power, right? Because she was like sleepy under this curse, and now the curse is broken as well. She can fully reintegrate with the prince to be fruitful and multiply. It is exactly at this moment in the story when the father finally dies, and the new fruit can go take over the kingdom peacefully under the sort of supervision of the queen inner feminine. Because when he effects this and survives the night, he then transforms literally from man into king. Right? At the end of this now, he is king, which was the point of the golden-headed insight, to transform this man into king, this inner masculine part of you into inner king. Right? And in previous sessions where we talked about initiation and the phases of life, there's a masculine track and a feminine track, echoed by, the path of men, women, what have you in the outer world. But within you, regardless of your gender, you have a masculine track of transformation and a feminine track, and ideally they braid into each other. Right? The masculine is boy, man, king, sage, wise man. It's 3 or 4 depending on how you count. And on the feminine side, it's girl, woman, mother/queen, crone. Right? These are not biological life cycles. These are cycles of transformation within you. So here, this interaction between the inner masculine and feminine affects the transformation of your inner masculine from man into king. What is the difference between a man and a king? There's generally, this is a whole other talk, but your inner king, it's not a question of power, because the warrior has plenty of power. The warrior has plenty of protective power, destructive power, etc., etc. But this next level of king adds a couple of features to that warrior power. Right? King power is a question of 2 things. The first is a question of wisdom. So it takes in the black sort of wisdom of the snake. Odysseus at the end of the Odyssey and the winnowing fan, the symbol of brute force or power turning into sort of discernment, judgment, wisdom, which we've talked about in past sessions. And then the other thing that typically delineates king from man, in addition to wisdom, is the power to give blessing. Right? That's when you move from warrior to king. A warrior can defend, protect, and destroy. The next level of king has wisdom. And with this wisdom, you can look upon something and have the insight that it is good. And then have the power of voice to say that this is good, which is, right, in a word, the power of blessing. To have the wisdom to see something as good, and then to speak it as good and give it your blessing. Okay, so those are my notes that I had prepared. Gary, do you want to come back on and see where else we take this? It's 11:30, so we've got a little bit of time.
Hey, Artie.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah.
Anything to add?
I loved the tiny detail, but such a telling insight on, the fact that there were 100 men who cast nets and failed, and there were like 190 suitors to the princess who died, who wouldn't survive beyond 12 hours. It's such a thing that we experience. At least the way I see it is when we go through patterns of something that happens to us over and over again. And to a point where we start noticing that there's a pattern. For example, we end up in very similar situations over and over again. We end up with very similarly patterned co-workers again and again. And you tend to think, why is it that
lovers and partners
and partners over and over again?
Or follows.
Yeah, I think, why is it that I always have this one kind of colleague who's always this way towards me? Why is it that I always end up getting into trouble at work in this particular way all the time?
Yeah.
And then, there is that insight that comes to you randomly. You're not looking for it. You're not really trying to find a solution to this particular pattern or problem that you have. And something just happens. You get a certain insight into your own inner self as to who you are and why you're that way. And it's almost like, okay, that pattern doesn't happen anymore. You've kind of just crossed that hurdle, like in a hurdle race. You just cross that and that's it. You're not looking back after that. So it's yeah, I mean, that was a very powerful symbol for me in the story, despite the fact that it's a very tiny detail. So I love that.
I love that. That kind of makes me feel, even something like grief, where all the researchers are like, yeah, it can happen all at once, but then later it will still come in waves, even after you're over it and everything. I mean, what they're really describing is that it just happens however it happens, right? It's like the scientific way of saying it just happens however it happens, right?
Yeah.
And I think part of the magic of these transformations is that the crux is this aspect of reconciliation, right? Where here, the golden-headed fish, right? You come to this kind of reconciliation, this relationship of good faith in either direction, where I let you go for no reason. I'm not expecting you to come back. And the golden-headed fish comes back, not through expectation, not through fear, threat, or control, but for no good reason, out of love. And it's like, oh, well, I'm going to take care of you, right? Yeah. And it's almost like this is how it happens even physically with the organs in our body, right? It's like, the lungs don't pump saying, okay, heart, you better do the next one or I'm going to stop pumping the next. They just go. They just go. Everything just goes and it all just sort of works out. There's this deeper wisdom or archetypal pattern that makes everything kind of work out. So here at the end of the day, the ultimate test is, for me, did you resolve the situation through brute force and suppressing, like, these parts of you that were not listening? Or did you come into reconciliation?
Yeah.
And reconciliation, especially around grief, is this feeling of like, you get to this point where you recognize the grief within you as valid. It's no less painful, but you're not resisting it anymore. And you're like, if this is the new normal and I just have this flu of grief for the rest of my life, I'm all right with that. I'm all right with that.
Yeah.
Right. Grief is a form of praise. And the person I lost, the thing I lost, is worthy of the rest of my life grieving him or her or thinking about them. And that's all right. I don't need to move on. Right. And then it goes away. You transform it. That's not why you did it. It just goes away on its own. And then your friends are like, oh, great, you got over it. And you're like, well, no. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, it's fine. I'm fine. Let's go have a drink. It's fine. Right.
Yeah.
And then months later, years later, you get hit with this wave of the same grief. And the power of the insight of this pattern is that you don't think you're relapsing. You don't think you screwed up. You don't think, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? I thought I got over this. Why is it coming back? You're like, it comes back. And when you reconcile it, you're like, oh, hey, how's it going? Where you been? Yeah. And it's still painful. You're losing sleep with this wave of grief, but it becomes this valid part of you, part of your family, if you will, your inner family. And there is no more of these 190 circumambulations of saying, no, go away, push away. And these transformations happen spontaneously. I don't know. It's not really precise, but hopefully people get a sense for what I'm trying to communicate, express here.
Yeah. I mean, I sense that, at least when you say the transformation happens spontaneously, it still has those 100 or 190 cycles that you go through, and it doesn't feel that way in that time period. But then you also know when you look back that, that is the moment when the transformation happened. You can kind of tell. But, when you're going through so many rounds of circumambulation, I don't think it's kind of, it feels spontaneous at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see this pattern all the time, even in like Buddhism, right? There's the whole Pali tradition of all the stories about Buddha in the lives before he was the actual final Buddha, right? The sort of 190 sort of rounds, metaphorically speaking, that the Buddha went through, giving his life for this, saving that, and they're told as kind of allegorical moral stories. But when you see the overall pattern, it's like, yeah, he went through 190 times to get to this point. And each time he got a little bit better or something was transformed. So if even the Buddha, right, has to go through that, then, we feel, not as much like we're slobs when we go through it ourselves.
Yeah. And the other thing that I felt quite significant is the fact that the Arab kind of cuts off the head of the snake, which you did mention in your notes, that it's about, even the wisdom, even the feminine wisdom that comes at you to transform you, and that has this intellectual part that this embodied insight kind of takes
all the
over.
venom is in the head. All the venom is in the head.
And it's transformative in a way that, you have to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and start all over again. But also, again, like the circumambulatory path, you are progressing forward in some way, but you're stepping back to do another cycle. And the fact that this golden-headed fish, the Arab, because of the constant engagement and how much the prince trusts him and listens to him, has become so strong that this embodiment is able to kind of intersect and take over the intellectual part and say, okay, so we're not, I think we've had enough. 190 is more than enough. We're going to go to the next phase now, because we now trust and take along the body with us, and it's not just about the mind. So I feel like that's a wonderful insight in itself, to know that the body is that powerful, and an embodied insight, when you have insights that you feel in your body, and not just I understand how this works, so I get it. It's not that, but to kind of feel it within your body, to kind of completely internalize it, for a better word. I think it's so powerful that it just works on its own.
I mean, it's like a lot of things around like habits. It's like, oh yeah, I know doing this thing this way is good for me, and I get it now. I've read all the data and all the science, so now I'm going to do it this way in the future. And obviously you don't do it. You don't do it. Something in your body revolts. And you like pound yourself, and you're like, oh, I'm a bad person. I'm not exercising enough. I'm not eating healthily enough. But all of these things are still a signal from, your body. And the question is like, what do you do when you get an insight from your body, where your body's like, I don't want to go to that meeting. I don't want to hang out with these people. I don't want to do this thing. I don't want you doing this thing to me. Your body's saying, I don't want you doing this thing to me anymore. Where you use me for numbing or pleasure or looking good for like prestige and validation. And often you come to this point of like reconciliation with your body. It's like, okay, you know what? We're just going to do whatever you want. You take care of that. I'll take care of this. And I'm not going to interfere with you. And you'll have these, what Western medicine will call like spontaneous, resolutions, right? Or all of a sudden out of nowhere, right? The nicotine patch, nothing worked. And all of a sudden out of nowhere, something else happens. You come to this like inner reconciliation, and you just stop smoking for like no reason. Just can't even explain it. Like one day I got up, something clicked in me, and I was like done. And you hear this about drinking, you hear this about like many, many things. And it's not something that you can control. So you can't pitch it as a cure, because it is a spontaneous reconciliation that happens within you. And the path to that reconciliation is circumambulatory. It is labyrinthine. You can't control it, right? But what you can do is hold space for it. Right? It's like something happens in the wine cask, where then this vinegar turns into this delicious wine. Something happens in the Instant Pot, right? Where all of this, like these tough cuts of meat turn into this like incredible like nectar, right? Ambrosia. Don't exactly know how or why it happens, but we don't need to know. All I need to know is, what do I need to do? What I need to do is hold space for it. Put the wine in a barrel and don't interfere with it. Leave it alone. I put everything in the Instant Pot, leave it. The timer will go off, leave it for another 2 hours, leave it alone. Hold protected space for it. Which, in a lot of ways is what these sacred space sessions are, right? Protected space for you to think whatever you want to think and to feel whatever you want to feel. And in so doing, we get to the point where it's like, we have the chance. We're not trying to control the outcome, but when you think whatever you want to think and you feel whatever you want to feel for no good reason, it's almost a pity to have to say this, but because if it's for no good reason, then that's it. Just do it for no good reason. But it does increase the chances that you end up feeling something, that you end up thinking something you hadn't thought before, that you end up feeling something you hadn't felt before. And what will that be? I don't know. But when you give space for it to come up, the right golden-headed fish typically comes up when you stop clenching.
Yeah. So, what would you recommend for the exercise this week?
Oh, the exercise. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the exercise we thought about for this week is, and again, let me revert to the fourth principle of proceeding sacred space: no expectation of participation. You do this only if you want, only if you want. It's just a suggestion. And the way to do this exercise is between now and next week's session, find some quiet time alone for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Find some quiet time at home, alone in your room, or if your home is a kind of zoo right now, when you're driving out to get groceries, when you park at the grocery store parking lot, you just sit in the car for 5 or 10 minutes before you actually go in. And it's like that little bit of a pause where no one's going to miss you. No one's going to care. It's no big deal. You take out some pen and paper in that quiet time, and you ask yourself these questions, and then you just, surrender writing control of your writing hand, and just barf out, dump out whatever comes out. Okay. And one question we thought of here is, for the exercise, what then, after hearing the story, is your golden-headed fish in your life? In other words, the thing in you that perhaps you can think of as an insight you got early in life, a powerful insight early in life for no good reason. And frankly, you weren't even clear what to do with it, like an unearned boon early in life. It could be insight into the way the world works, or a special talent, or simply just abilities. So even like being good at writing speeches or giving speeches, being good at math, being particularly expressive, being able to really hunker down and do detail-oriented work for hours at a time. Right? All of these abilities are typically because you have a special insight into the nature of something that others do not have. Right? Like, what makes you so able to sit and do accounting all day long, whereas I look at a ledger and I turn green and fall over, right? It's because you have a special kind of insight into the beauty of accounting, into the satisfaction of debits and credits, right? That allows you to sort of do that endlessly. And it's like, you just do it because you love it for some strange reason, right? And similarly with me for this healing related stuff. So anyway, what is an example of a golden-headed fish in your life? And the follow-on question then is, what then is the state of that insight now? What did you do with that golden-headed fish? Did you let it go? Did you let it lead you? Or is it too early? You caught this fish when you were 7, and you just let it go, and maybe it'll come back later. Did you bring it back immediately and fillet it and bleed it for lesser rewards? Right? But in either case, win, lose, or draw, whatever you did, what currently in the present moment is the guidance of this insight within you now? What is the guidance of the golden fish within you now? Where even is it in you now? Is it a love of nature, a love of numbers, a love of flowers or music, right? Where is this golden-headed fish in you now? And the reason the key question for me is to ask, what is its guidance now? Is because these parts of us, right? The Arab part of us, the king part of us, the fish part of us, when we kill them, when we see them die in dreams or mythopoetic kind of stories and visions, they don't actually die, they transform, right? You can't actually kill a part of yourself permanently, right? I mean, it like your liver doesn't die till you die, right? The sort of golden-headed fish within you doesn't die until you die. And in that case, even then, who knows, right? So even if you bled the talent within you for lesser rewards, even if you let it go, even if you like exiled it, you stuffed it down, you locked it in a cage, the point is it's still there, right? It's still there. Let's close this window. And its power, even if it is not used, even if it is a little bit misused, that power is still within you, and you can still ask it questions and ask it for guidance. An image that came up in our brainstorm was, it's like this part of you, this golden-headed fish insight is like a compass within you. And if you've had this compass since you were 7, now mind you, you can't break the compass. You break it, it'll transform into another sort of direction-finding form. Okay, it'll transform into GPS or something. But let's say it's a compass, and you've been using this compass for the past 30 years as nothing more than a paperweight on your bookshelf. Okay, even though you have not been using it according to its proper use, highest use, even though you may have forgotten about it, left it on a shelf to rot, its function is still undiminished. Okay, you can still at any point take the compass off your bookshelf, flip it open, and direction find using it. Right? The compass function in you never goes away. It can be buried, but it never actually goes away. So the question then is, what is your golden-headed fish? And what is your golden-headed fish telling you now? Right? What is it telling you now? You may think, oh, you know, I'm such and such age now. I missed my window. I missed it when I was younger. Now there's no hope. Woe is me. So, you know, that may be true. That may be true. I don't know, right? I don't know. But if you're not sure, if you don't know for sure, you can find out for sure by asking the golden-headed fish now. Where are we now? Not 30 years ago. Now, where are we? And now, what do we do? Okay. And if you're like, no, it's hopeless, I'm not even going to ask, because, you know, I had my chance to ask 30 years ago and I didn't, and I'm a big failure and there's no hope. Well, I'm like, if you have no hope because the original mistake you made was to not ask the golden-headed fish then, why would we make that same mistake now and not ask the golden fish yet again when you recognize like the big flaw of your life was to not ask the fish back then? So I'm like, well, just ask it now. And you're like, no, I'm not even going to ask it now. I'm like, okay, right. Let's, you know, keep driving. We'll go around the circumambulatory thing again. And there's no threat of control. Like, what's another couple months? What's another couple of years? You'll get another bite of the apple, right? You'll get another at-bat opportunity to ask the fish. And so that's kind of the feeling here. And to basically find your golden fish now and ask how it's leading you now. And then once you hear its message, to basically ask yourself, given this input that we have, will we consider finding a way to follow it? And you don't have to follow it. It's sacred space. It's only if you want, right? It's only if you want. Okay, so there was a bottom part of this that is missing now from the file, so I'm not sure where it went. Let me just look up here and see what else I may have had here. I think that's all the stuff I had for the session. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay. So that's it for this session. I hope that was helpful. And let's see, we've got a few minutes left, so I'll go ahead and close the session. So our next session is next week, next Sunday. Same time, same place. I'll just drop the link in Facebook and in Crowdcast for you to sign up there. If you want, it's free, obviously open to the public. Invite friends as you see fit. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and close the session. So I hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for being here with me and with us. And thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment and the spiritual nourishment of the shared sacred space with me and us. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great weekend, have a great week, and I will see you all in the next session. Thank you. Thank you.